The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View, sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee. And if you want, we meet at the Crown Plaza the second Thursday of every month. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to our website at nashuagop.org.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome Doris Hohensee, who's a candidate for Ward 3 as the state representative for Nashua. Anyway, Doris, you're now on the Board of Education here and you're running for state representative.
It's very interesting.
Yes, I think where you're leaning is education.
Definitely. If I were to get in, I would definitely lean towards education, because there's a big gap between what happens in a district and what's going on in the State House. And there has to be people that are knowledgeable with what things we face in the district to bring those to the state level on a regular basis, so that the laws coming down, the regulations coming down, help us and don't work against us, because we've had problems like that. There was the grading thing that's turning, the competency-based grading that's turning our district upside down, where we've got 80 and 90% of our students and parents against it. The majority of our teachers, 54%, oppose it, and yet we're forcing it on the district. But if you go back a few years, Senator Stiles brought 2 bills before the legislature, and they both failed. The last one in about 2011, 2012. She then went to the State Board of Education, and I just happened to be there. And she comes in and she's testifying to the board that they need to put it in regulations in the minimum standards for public school approval. Now, so what she's saying is, I want you to bypass all my colleagues in the legislature and write regulations that have no statutory authority. I mean, districts could challenge this. They're really, but anyway, it got through JLCAR, the Joint Legislative Administrative Committee, and so it's kind of like in the fuzzy land of, the legislature approved it without looking too hard, but they refused to pass the comprehensive program. So now we have the grading, which is still not mandatory even in the regulations, and we are turning our districts upside down about that. So
it does seem to be a big thing in the papers as far as, so you're saying that you're being really pushed in a direction that seems to be against what the teachers want, as well as the board.
The high school teachers that were polled, I don't know that the middle school teachers were polled on this. They had 2 changes that came before them. One was on conduct, and they were going to move a conduct grade to characteristics of a successful learner. And we paused that to say, we need some more information, and we need to know if this experimental program, the pilot, is successful, how it will improve learning. We need more information other than just to say that we've been working on this so long, we've been doing due diligence, which I respect, but now we should just do it because it's been so long waiting. And they wanted the grading to go into, and they said for consistency purposes. And the other problem with the grading is in the elementary school that they're trying to be consistent with. They have 4 levels, and the top is meeting competencies. The high school, you can meet competencies or exceed them. So we're promoting excellence. If the elementary and the middle school go down to just a mediocre, how does that, and then will this have to come into line? So there's a lot of questions that we're not getting answers.
It seems like there's the continuity. They want to push it all on people, but they haven't just brought it in gradually.
They should have brought it in from the bottom up, and they should be clear, and they should be looking at, remember that you've heard the phrase data-driven instructions or decision-making. So if it's data-driven, let's look at the data we've got from the high school. 25% less A's and 25% more F's. What's working here? So we're pushing our students down in grades. Now, if that's what they truly earned, maybe I would say okay, but let's talk about this more, because the students are saying to us on the board that sometimes when we get a quiz or a test or an assessment, we can't use tests anymore, that if you get 100, that you meet competencies. What do you have to do to exceed them? They're not always given that opportunity because in all this tumult and change, I mean, it's hard for teachers to not only get everything in place for meeting, but they've now got to get things, rubrics in place for exceeding, and the students aren't finding out how they can do that. So it's difficult. Plus, then if they try very hard and try to remediate their work, at the high end, they're called grade grubbers. At the low end, if they're not, they're called that, well, students don't care. How can we motivate them? So let's prevent these people from remediating and encourage these to do it more. Is that a fair system? So there's a lot of questions that we have, and it shouldn't just be pushed in because, I mean, these are students in high school applying to colleges.
Sure.
That's an expensive thing for parents. They want to make sure that their student's going to do well and present well to the colleges. And I've heard of a lot of the high-end students are now considering and leaving. We've got Bishop Girding, the private high school in Nashua. They're at full enrollment, I was told, which
Really?
they haven't been in a while. And you've got all those charter schools that we've got in the area that are new. So they're pulling in some of the students. So, and there's always homeschooling. So there's avenues for the people that don't like it to leave. So then we're not even getting, so what are we doing? Just leaving, not worrying about those that are left behind? No, I think everybody needs to be, their concerns need to be addressed.
So there's still a real difference in both what the teachers feel, what the parents feel, and what the board of, I guess the State Board of Education wants. Is that what you're telling me?
The State Board of Education, the State Department, they have this competency-based grading as a stepping stone for the next reform. And, you know, it's experimental. This is experimental, right. Each of the levels. We're putting so much into professional development, we don't know where we're going because it's all experimental. We need to slow down, look what we're getting for data, look what the other districts are getting for data, and do it a little bit more responsibly. Because this money that we could save while we pause and wait and watch and collect the data, we might be using to improve our district or enhance our contract negotiations with teachers. All this money is being thrown at this that we don't even know the outcome.
And they're just pushing it because it's taking too long for them? Is that what's...
Well, the last reason for the middle school was given for consistency purposes, and because we've been waiting so long for it to settle down at the high school, so we think now maybe we can just push it through, but it really hasn't settled in the high school.
So you've had objectives for this, and you're collecting data, but you're not taking the time to really analyze and understand the data. Is that all?
We don't look at it. And like the block scheduling, at one point we polled the parents, and there was interest in having something other than just block scheduling. Right. Because for a foreign language or for math, there's a discontinuity. Some kids will go from French 1 to French 2 within a semester. Some will be within 3 semesters. So you have all levels of what do I remember from way back. So they were thinking of having half blocks or skinny classes. It was offered to parents, but then it was never scheduled or implemented. So that's something, and I know Bedford, they take and they alternate. They keep the blocks, so it's easy to schedule with 4 blocks, but then they'll say odd days and even days, they'll do block A and block B, which would be your semester, fall semester and spring semester. So you're alternating back and forth, and there's no discontinuity. Why don't we discuss these things? Those are...
You know, one question I have, how do the colleges feel about what you're doing with the students? And are they being prepared still for community college or university level?
The colleges need to get students, and they can't just dismiss all the students because this is a reform that's going nationwide. Right. So I think they're aware of some of this. Whether or not they like it, I don't know if they would be forthcoming to say. We just looked at our standards, and because the state had lowered the standards, the minimum standards, and got rid of Algebra 1 as a graduation requirement and lowered the world history requirement from a full to a half credit, the administration decided they wanted to do this, and the board was, again, pressured to do this. There was no opposition and went through. It turns out the teachers hadn't weighed in on this. Well,
really?
That usually is an administration function to, poll the teachers before they come to us. Or I think there was a lot of confusion with the contract negotiation going on, so they were distracted. The union usually comes in. Bob Sherman was relentless in terms of, I've seen this on the agenda, I've looked at your proposal, I have these comments, and that would give us pause. We didn't get that either. So hopefully next Monday we'll revisit that or reconsider that and get the input that we need from the teachers. Maybe we can have, because we have 3 different level diplomas, 20, 27, and 32 credits. So maybe we'll have different requirements for each one. Maybe if it's a necessity for the core curriculum, but it doesn't have to be a necessity for the other 2. I don't know what the board will do. I'm hoping that they'll look at it more
Seems like
thoughtfully.
you want to, you have too many levels of children that are in the school, and I think you try to accommodate for what kind of grouping them somehow.
Well, there's the foreign language, or the English language learners. There's the special needs students. So there's all different levels. So there has to be some accommodation. But we had a middle school teacher come in and testify in front of the full board saying, there are kids in the middle school and they don't care whether they pass or fail because they know they're going to the next level anyway. That's a problem.
That is.
And why do we have in the high school students that can't read properly or
Right.
read at a 3rd grade level? Where are the speed bumps in this? There's a lot of things to look at.
Did they have remedial classes in high school?
They were usually summer school, but we do have in the high school the E-block where you come to get some help and remediation and instruction from teachers.
Several years ago, there was a report that the National Community College had several hundred of our graduates in remedial classes, some as many as 3 different remedial subjects.
And that's widespread across the country. It's sad, but it's not just our district. But I think it's because we're looking fast and furious on how to innovate with these experimental programs that we don't just sit down and say what works, what doesn't. Can we improve this? I mean,
have you had a recent report from the community college as to remedial classes?
I've heard that more at the state level when I've been up there, where they're talking about how much remediation has to go on. So they're suggesting that something be done at the lower levels, and we're saying that's what the competencies are saying, that if you're not competent, you don't move forward, you keep on working on your competency. But are they holding kids back, and how does this work? And are our kids, these are the things we need to look at statistically and specifically. What do we have? What are the numbers? What's working? What's not? We've had that pilot program going on for a year. And it's going to go on for this year, so it'll be 2 years. So let's really get serious and look at what we've got before we innovate on the next 3 levels, because are we building on a solid foundation?
Well, it's going to be interesting, to get to involve the colleges, junior colleges, or whatever you want to call them, with this, because they're the next level.
Yes.
And
I heard someone propose legislation. I thought it was a little bit over the top, but they said if they get to college and they're having to do remedial work, that the district should pay for that.
that's an interesting way of doing it.
I understand that they want some repercussions, but I don't know how that would definitely work. Why did they let them in?
Yeah.
If they are not at the right level? You could question it that way.
Well, yeah, but you say that they want to take them in, and the remedial one is, I don't know what their success rate is to bringing them up to where they want to have them. I mean, that happened when I went to college 50 years ago.
Well, I know the Ivy League schools will take students that didn't have a high-level background in, say, math. They didn't have calculus, and they're coming to an Ivy League school without being fully prepared. They will bring those students in over the summer and bring them up to speed. So why don't the colleges say, okay, you're not quite up to speed on these subjects. It's your business, if they don't want to provide the over the summer program, to go somewhere and to get remediated so that you can pass maybe some type of a test to show that you're at level.
Yeah, one of the problems is until they get them in there, all they have to really do is go by the record that the schools generate.
That could be that.
And
so what does that mean about the SATs? Do they? I mean, what are we measuring?
The SATs, some people do very well on, some people do lousy, just because of the format of the test.
And the format has changed for Common Core.
Well, it could be.
But you've got that college entrance test. You've got grades. You've got APs. If they can't determine what level this student is at, why are they accepting?
Because some of those data are wrong.
It could be. Then why don't they say, well, we'd like you to take this entrance exam for our school?
Well, that's what they do after they get up there.
Yeah, but that's after they accept them. But why not before, if there's some question?
They could do that.
I don't know. I mean, because there's no incentive. What I'm hearing is there's some students that go through. I don't know if these students apply to college or not, but there's some students that understand that they will not be held back. So is that something that we need to discuss as a board?
Mm-hmm.
And some teachers say a lot of it has to do, it's wrapped around attendance. Are these students attending? And is there a program for them starting in the elementary school if they're not keeping pace to just, move sideways and get the support they need, or focus on whether it's math and reading, if those are the two critical areas.
Yeah.
And then once they're back on track, that move back into the mainstream.
So there are no formal structures, or are there just a few to take the kids that are trailing in competency, I guess you'd have to say, to help them get more competent in reading or math?
There used to be extra work, and there used to be ways teachers worked with students inside or outside of class to help remediate. So with this new program, they're saying they're trying to divide up the subjects into competencies, which works beautifully at the elementary level. Can you read from 0 to 20?
Sure.
And it's very simple skills. When you get to the high school, you've got 3 math competencies, no matter which course you take. So they're kind of general. They're not as specific. So if you don't do well on one or other of these competencies, you're supposed to remediate that competency alone instead of redoing the whole course. So I understand the concept that it's focusing on the deficiency, and they can remediate during the course, they can remediate after the course is over, and so that's supposed to pull them back up. If they don't, then they're supposed to not get the credit. How is that working compared to before? Are we getting better success, or are we getting more Fs?
But you don't know yet.
Well, the data that we're getting doesn't show that it's pulling us up.
Is this extra help after school or Saturdays or summer?
There'll be a separate program. The competencies are supposed to remediate in place,
Right.
in the classroom. So if you're taking a test, and this was some of the students' complaint, some kids can go in unprepared. No, I can remediate it later. I'll study for this test and not worry about that. I'll get a good grade here, and then I'll come back and remediate. So there's a triage going on for the high-end students, and they don't like that, but you have to have rules that everybody plays by.
Yeah.
Or if they do well, but they don't do as well as they want to, they're in there, remediating over and over again. Are the students that really need it in there remediating? Right. We're getting reports on those E-blocks. They have 4 blocks of classes and lunch. And there's an E-block in there where they're supposed to go in the middle of the day and work with a teacher that they may need help at. Mm-hmm. Or if they don't need help, they're supposed to have some extra interesting course workshops of some sort that they can, or a study. But we're hearing that they're not always in the E-block that they were assigned to. So they're getting a computer program to find out where they are. So it gets complex to figure out, to analyze, well, what is happening? Is it working? Before we expand it to all the grades, let's see what we've
it's
got.
when you have a problem or introduce any program in commercial areas as well as education. You set up an objective. You have how you measure you're attaining the objective, and if you don't have a measurement, how do you know you get there?
They should have goals in the beginning. This is the baseline. Right. This is our expectation. Right. Have we met it? Have the grades improved?
Mm-hmm. They're not doing that.
We're not. Well, I'm getting some data back, and it's not all favorable. But then there's this push. Let's just keep expanding it. And it's like, slow down. Let's do it thoughtfully. Because every time they make the change, they've got to change the computer system. That costs money. It changes the functionality. Then the teachers need to be trained on how to use the new system. So why are we pushing down all these costs before we know that it's lifting the students?
So if you get elected, what would you want to do to assure that this is handled better?
Well, I want to make sure that the districts know that these reforms are voluntary. Like, we got Common Core in place, and then we were told, yeah, it's voluntary. The same with in Nashua, we got the competencies in place with the grading, or, pushing to reform the grading, thinking it was mandatory. When I got on the board, it was made clear that it's voluntary. Well, some people didn't like it because they want to continue going ahead. So it's got to be clear what's mandatory, what's voluntary, so there's no miscommunication and misallocation of funds.
And if you turn down something, you don't get penalized for it.
Right. Some people can devise something better. Like Manchester, they supposedly have their own standards. Wakefield decided to use the old Massachusetts standards that were very successful. Those options should be clear so that districts, can work with the legislature or with the department better. Right now, there's not that feeling. A lot of times the department pulls our administrators up to the department and educates them. They should talk to the board members. The board members shouldn't be out of the loop. They shouldn't be the last ones to know when it's halfway implemented that this is what we've been working on for 3 years and now we're cluing you in. And, well, why are you holding us up? That's the wrong way to present these things. It's got to be the board should be leading in terms of being informed. This is the new projects. How would you like to, as a board, consider them? Okay, let's bring your administrators up. Or at least bring them up together. But right now, we're the last to know, and it's not working very well.
Well, do you think legislation is necessary, or would it even work? Because Education Committee was one of the most prolific ones last session.
Well, because of all of this acrimony over all this changes that are just coming too fast, the teachers are overwhelmed. They need to be respected. Their opinions should matter. Why aren't they leading the charge instead of like at the end? They're not at the front of this. They need to buy in. If you hire teachers, these are professional accredited teachers, and they're not buying into, the majority of your teachers are not buying into this, why are we doing it? And especially when it's voluntary. So who are we not respecting? The administration is not respecting our teachers. And they're telling the board to hop, the whole thing. It's too fast, and it's not the right organizational structure in terms of how we're going about reforming our schools.
Does they make any effort of looking at the continuity of, kindergarten through college as far as
we're starting to do a really good job. We've got different vertical alignment between the high school and the elementary school, and we did a lot of that. I think some of it's pulling back. We need to address to allow it to continue, but I did see that structure was being put in place, that we can go from each department will work down to make sure, because we're revamping all of our standards, so they want to make sure that they align. So the teachers are doing this, and it's really good work. So,
well, I'm on the Public Works Committee, which handles the capital budget, and we've really impressed more with the way that community colleges are handling the training that they do, which is both, I guess you say, academic and industrial, that they're really going out there and looking at the needs and developing coursework that fits those needs and the desire of some of the students that come up into their operations.
You don't want to graduate and find out that there's no jobs for your specialty. Because specialties are so much more important now.
That's right.
They don't want so much of a generalized student. They want them to hit the ground running.
Well, yeah, the general stuff should be done by high school. I think that just the basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, as they say, and then you get into the specialties.
There used to be a more liberal education at college, too. Yeah. Liberal arts, I don't mean not conservative liberal, but liberal arts, and then you got into either a master's or you got into industry and you got trained there. But the expectation with so many graduates available is they want somebody that already knows whatever niche that they've got.
Well, there is competition on more on that level between the schools, and as far as now they're doing so many things on the website, and getting all sorts of education from that.
Yes, and shared courses, online courses, even at a college level. It's fabulous. What the students can find, homeschoolers, and enjoyed a lot of that
Oh,
because
yeah.
they love finding things like that. When I started homeschooling, there was no web, but towards the end, it was alive and
You got them
there.
all through there.
They all got through. They're all
Good.
graduated. So now I have more time to reflect and look back and figure out what works, what doesn't, how to enable teachers in our public schools to do the best they can for our kids, because they're where it's at. It's our teachers.
Oh, sure. They have a good desire, but it's the administrators all along.
And is it the administrators' fault, or is it the state leaning on the administrators? I don't know, but we've got to get the legislature
It's a higher level of administrators.
right, to let out, to ease this pressure so that our
Yeah,
teachers can
yeah.
come to their.
Yeah, you can't do things like that overnight. You got to plan it, and you got to see it. You know, if you're going down the right street, or you got to make a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn.
Got to know in advance.
And so you hope that you can get them straightened out if you get elected.
Well, I can watch and make sure there's no more damage. I can try to make sure that there's not a lot of push down to the district. And I can come with the knowledge of what is working in our district, what's not, where the problems are. So I think I have a little bit to contribute at that level.
Well, you've certainly been working on it for quite a while, and you've been an activist now, I know, for a number of years before you got...
Since 1990, when they passed the home ed law,
Yeah.
and they made it rather difficult for parents to do it at home. It's now been changed, and homeschooling is growing.
Yeah, it is.
It's growing even in Nashua. I think it's growing by leaps and bounds. And part of it is that push out from the school, because when they don't, you go to the school and you talk to them and they're not listening to you, and the grading's all upside down, and your kid's not being able to, adjust to this system, parents will find an alternative because they're protecting their kids, as they should. So we've got to get it so that it works for more kids.
Well, we're almost finished with our time. Is there anything else that you're going to do if you get up there in Concord?
No, that education will be my main
Education's your big
focus.
one.
Yeah, that'll be great, because I already understand what they do up there. I've learned a lot about the school board. So I think I can put the two together and I can be helpful. And we've got another member on our board, Dave Murataki, that's
right.
up there, and he has that added value. So I think we're representing our district well and protecting our district by doing this.
I think that there are several of the representatives here in Nashua that are taking a very active role in some of that, too, some of that legislation up there. Well, thank you very much for your time. Good luck in your election. And is there anything that you want to say about getting help from the people?
No, I think we're doing it. It's
You're doing everything all
small
right?
little district, and I got to get out there and
Hit the doors.
hit the doors.
Okay.
Okay.
Good luck on
Thank you
that.
very much.
Thank you very much.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.